The loud screeching of tires on the road was the last thing I expected to hear as I stood outside my home. In an instant, everything changed. Before I knew it, I was lying on the ground, my body aching all over, groceries scattered around me. I had been hit by a car, and as I tried to understand what just happened, I looked up and saw who was driving the car. It was my mother-in-law, Janet. Later, in the hospital, I lay in bed, sore and bruised. The phone rang, and it was my husband, Adam. His voice was tense and anxious. "Kelly, you need to tell the police you just fell," he said quickly. "They're saying someone saw Mom hit you with the car."
Can you believe that?
His words shocked me. Not only had Janet run me over, but now Adam and his parents were trying to cover it up. Listening to Adam's excuses, my mind drifted back to the early days of our marriage. I remembered when Adam and I first met. We had worked at the same office, where he was assigned to mentor me. Adam wasn't exactly charming, but he was steady and attentive, and over time, he won me over. Our relationship seemed like a fairy tale in the beginning. After our wedding, I quit my job and moved into his parents' home, something I soon regretted. Living with Janet and her husband Tyler was a constant struggle. Janet had a sharp tongue and loved reminding me of my duties as a wife. "You should be grateful to Adam," she would say with a tone that felt more insulting than kind. "You're living a comfortable life because of him." Tyler, though quieter than Janet, would often make me feel small with his outdated ideas about women. My relationship with Adam began to crumble as he sided more and more with his parents. Whenever I tried to talk to him about how I felt, he would brush me off. "They're old," he would say dismissively. "You need to be more understanding." As time went by, our dreams of having children started to fade, which only added more strain to our marriage. Janet and Tyler constantly pressured us about having grandchildren, but Adam seemed completely uninterested. He was absorbed in his own world, leaving me to deal with his parents' constant remarks. My only comfort during these tough times came from my neighbor, Diane, and her husband, Jeremy. Diane had gone through her own struggles and understood what I was going through. She became my friend and a source of support, someone who knew the truth behind the perfect image of my marriage. Lying in the hospital bed, I thought about all of this as Adam's voice brought me back to the present. "Kelly, you need to do this for us, for the family," he pleaded, trying to convince me to lie about what had happened. But something inside me had changed. I could no longer be the submissive wife, constantly bending to their demands. They had crossed a line, and I knew I couldn't just let it go this time. I hung up the phone, feeling a new sense of determination. They needed to face the consequences of their actions. I was ready to fight back. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about standing up against the unfairness that had ruled my life for far too long. Lying in the quiet hospital room, my mind was racing. I felt pain not just from my injuries but from the betrayal by the people I once considered family. As the sunlight streamed in through the window, casting long shadows on the floor, Diane walked in. Her face was full of concern. She sat down next to me and asked gently, "Kelly, how are you feeling?" I tried to smile and replied, "I've been better." Then I asked her, "What did the police say?" Diane's face turned serious. "At first, they believed the story that it was just an accidental fall," she said. "But I told them what I saw. I saw Janet driving out of the garage like a bat out of hell, and then I found you on the ground." Hearing this, I clenched my fists, anger boiling inside me. Adam wanted me to lie to protect his family. Diane reached out and held my hand tightly. "You can't let them get away with this, Kelly," she said. "This isn't just about the accident. It's about years of control and manipulation. This is your chance to finally break free." Her words struck a chord. For years, I had put up with Janet's rude comments and Tyler's dismissive attitude. Adam had always been passive, never standing up for me, always letting his parents say and do as they pleased. I realized I had been stuck in a cycle of control and humiliation, always trying to stay strong, but it was exhausting. As Diane and I continued talking, a plan began to take shape in my mind, a plan not just to get justice, but to finally stand up for myself. I decided it was time Janet and her family faced the consequences of their actions. The next day, a police officer came to take my statement. I told him everything: the accident, the pain, the betrayal, and how Adam begged me to cover it up. The officer listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, he looked at me seriously and said, "We have enough to bring them in for questioning. We'll investigate further, but your statement is very important." Hearing this gave me a sense of power. This wasn't just about a legal process. It felt like the first step in taking back control of my life. Over the next few days, my determination grew stronger. Diane visited regularly, keeping me updated on the investigation. She told me how the community was rallying around me, offering support, and expressing their outrage at what Janet had done. Jeremy, her husband, was reviewing their security camera footage, hoping it had captured something that could help. Knowing that we might have evidence sparked a small hope in me. If we could prove Janet hit me on purpose, it would be undeniable proof of what they had done. Each day, my body grew stronger, but it was the hope for justice that truly gave me strength. I was finally on the path to freedom. I was no longer the quiet, suffering woman who stayed silent in the shadows. I was now a woman ready to stand up, ready to fight back, and determined to reveal the truth about the people who had hurt me for so long. The small room in the police station felt colder than ever as I waited for the dentist. My hands were shaking, not out of fear, but from a mix of anger and anticipation. Finally, the door opened, and Dennis Ritchie entered, his face serious. "We reviewed the footage from your neighbor's security camera," he said, placing a file on the table in front of me. "It clearly shows Janet's car hitting you. It's unmistakable." A wave of relief washed over me. But with that relief came a burning desire for justice. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice steady. "We're bringing them in for questioning today, your husband too. They'll have to answer for what they did," Dennis Ritchie replied. I left the police station with a plan forming in my mind. It wasn't enough just to expose what they had done. They needed to understand the full weight of their actions. Later that day, Diane called with an update. "The police just took Janet, Tyler, and Adam in for questioning," she told me. "Everyone in the neighborhood is talking about it. They can't believe what Janet did." News spread quickly, filling people with shock and anger toward a family they once respected. For me, it felt like the years of silent suffering were finally being recognized. That night, lying in my hospital bed, I imagined Janet's face when she was finally forced to face what she had done. This once powerful, intimidating woman was now cornered by her own actions. I had imagined this moment many times in my head, and each time, it felt like a small victory. But it wasn't just Janet who had betrayed me. Adam's betrayal hurt even more. He had chosen to side with his parents over me, over honesty and decency. He had to see how deeply his choice had affected me. A few days later, I was discharged from the hospital. My body was still sore, but my spirit was strong. Diane and Jeremy were there waiting for me, their faces filled with concern and determination. "Kelly, we're with you in this," Jeremy said firmly. "Whatever you need." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a deep sense of support that I hadn't felt in years. That evening, as I sat in Diane's living room, we turned on the news. The story of my accident and the investigation had made the local headlines. The screen showed images of Janet, Tyler, and Adam. Their faces were now public, their reputations ruined. It was a strange feeling to see them like that, people who had once controlled and belittled me now exposed for what they had done. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of freedom and power. I knew this was just the beginning, but I was ready for whatever came next. It was finally time for me to reclaim my life. My private pain had now become a public spectacle, but I felt no sympathy for them. This was the beginning of their downfall, a downfall they had caused themselves. The air in the interrogation room was thick with tension as Janet, Tyler, and Adam sat across from me. Their faces showed a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. Dennis Ritchie sat by my side, his presence a steady reminder that justice was at work. "You all understand why you're here," Dennis Ritchie said, looking directly at them. "The evidence is clear. Janet, you hit Kelly with your car and then drove off without stopping. Tyler, You saw what happened and chose to stay silent. And Adam, you tried to cover it all up. Janet's face stayed defiant, but I could see a hint of fear in her eyes. She spoke, her voice trembling slightly. It was an accident. I never meant to hit her. Tyler said nothing, his eyes glued to the table. Adam looked embarrassed and guilty, his face turning red. Finally, he spoke up, his voice shaky. Mom, why didn't you just stop? Why did you run? It seemed he was just now realizing how serious this all was. I looked at them, feeling no pity. After all the years of mistreatment, my heart had hardened. You could have killed me, Janet. And all you cared about was saving yourselves, I said firmly. Janet's tough front broke, and tears began to roll down her face. I was scared. I panicked, she sobbed. Tyler finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. We were wrong. We never should have lied, he admitted. Dennis Ritchie then turned to Adam. And you, Adam, you tried to twist the story and even asked your wife to lie for you. How do you explain that? Adam looked down, his words coming out softly. I don't know. I wanted to protect my parents. I felt a mix of disgust and sadness for Adam. He had chosen to side with his parents over the truth and over me, his own wife. You didn't just betray me, Adam, I said, my voice calm but strong. You betrayed everything we ever had. Dennis Ritchie nodded, his face serious. Each of you will face charges for your actions. This is a serious matter. As we left the room, I felt a sense of closure. They had finally been exposed for who they truly were. Janet, hiding behind her tears, was revealed as a coward. Tyler, though silent, was just as guilty for standing by and letting it all happen. And Adam, a man so blinded by loyalty to his parents that he had lost sight of what was right. Stepping out of the police station, the world outside felt different. For the first time in years, I felt free. I had faced them, spoken my truth, and now I could start to move on. The weight I had carried for so long had finally lifted, and I was ready to start a new chapter of my life. I had faced my past, and now it was time to create my future. The air felt fresher, the sky seemed wider, and I was free from the heavy grip of Janet and Adam's control. Diane and Jeremy were waiting for me outside, their faces showing both concern and pride. You were amazing in there, Diane said warmly. Thank you, I replied, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for their constant support. In the weeks that followed, the legal proceedings against Janet, Tyler, and Adam began. The news of their charges spread through our community, stirring up mixed reactions. Some people were shocked, while others expressed disappointment. But for me, this was proof that my struggles had finally been seen and understood. During this time, I stayed with Diane and Jeremy. They gave me not just a place to stay, but a warm, caring environment where I could begin to heal. Their kindness was a sharp contrast to the years of cold treatment I had endured with Adam and his family. One evening, as we sat together in Diane's living room, Jeremy shared some news. The prosecutor's office called. Janet and Tyler are facing serious charges. Adam, too, for trying to cover it all up. I nodded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sadness. They were finally being held accountable for their actions. What about you, Kelly? Diane asked gently. What will you do now? I took a deep breath, feeling clearer than I had in a long time. I'm filing for divorce. I can't stay with someone who chose his parents over me, especially in a situation like this. Diane reached over and squeezed my hand, her support unspoken but deeply felt. The divorce went through quickly, partly because of Adam's guilt and the strong evidence against him. I received a fair settlement, a small price for the years of emotional pain I had endured. With this settlement, I decided to start fresh. I rented a small apartment, modest, but entirely my own. It was my space, a place where I could rebuild my life on my own terms. Diane and Jeremy were by my side as I began this new chapter. Jeremy, who owned a small business, offered me a job. You've got great skills and experience, Kelly. We'd be lucky to have you, he said sincerely. I accepted his offer, excited to take back my independence and step into a world I had been shut out of for so long. Starting this job felt like rediscovering myself. I found parts of me that had been buried under years of unhappiness. I was no longer just Adam's wife. I was Kelly, a woman with strength and identity. As the weeks passed, I settled into my new life. I felt a peace and purpose that I hadn't felt in years. Working alongside Diane and Jeremy helped me realize my own worth and capability. Months went by, and the day of the final verdict in Janet and Tyler's case finally arrived. I knew this moment would add a true end to that painful chapter, allowing me to fully embrace my new beginning. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt a sense of closure. Across the room, Janet, Tyler, and Adam sat, their faces filled with worry and regret. The judge's voice echoed through the quiet room. In light of the evidence, this court finds Janet and Tyler Gill guilty of hit and run and obstruction of justice. Adam Gill is found guilty of aiding in the cover-up. As the judge announced their sentences, a low murmur filled the room. Janet and Tyler were sentenced to prison, while Adam received community service and probation. Their faces fell as they realized the seriousness of their punishment. After the verdict, I stepped outside the courthouse, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. Diane and Jeremy joined me, their presence a reminder of the support that had helped me through this tough time. Justice has been served, Diane said with relief in her voice. Yes, but at a cost, I replied, thinking about the years of pain and loss I had endured to reach this point. News of the sentencing quickly spread. Janet, who was once respected in the community, was now a convicted criminal. Tyler, her silent accomplice, faced the same fate. And Adam, my former husband, was seen as someone who had betrayed his own wife to protect his dishonest parents. In the weeks that followed, I felt a change within myself. The heavy weight of my past slowly started to lift, replaced by a growing sense of freedom and strength. My life, once controlled by Janet and Adam, was now mine to shape. Working at Jeremy's company gave me a fresh start, with new challenges and joys. I thrived in this supportive environment, feeling my confidence grow day by day. Diane, always by my side, encouraged me to fully embrace this new chapter. The biggest surprise, though, came when I least expected it. At a company event, I met William, a friend of Jeremy's. He was kind, respectful, and saw me for who I truly was, not just for my past. Our friendship grew naturally, and in time, it turned into something more. Within a year, we were married in a simple, intimate ceremony. It was a celebration of new beginnings and healing. William knew everything about my past, the pain and betrayal I had faced. Instead of it being a burden, it brought us closer. As I stood beside William, looking into his kind eyes, I felt like I was finally where I was meant to be. My life had changed in ways I never imagined. I was no longer the woman who had suffered in silence. I had overcome my struggles, found true love, and started a life filled with respect, trust, and peace. Standing there with William, surrounded by friends like Diane and Jeremy, I felt grateful for my journey. I had turned my pain into strength, and my future was now bright and filled with hope. I realized this was what a real partnership looked like, built on respect, support, and understanding. It was everything my marriage to Adam had lacked. A year had passed since the trial, and life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. William and I had moved into a cozy home, a place that truly felt like ours. The painful memories of my time with Janet, Tyler, and Adam were slowly fading, replaced by the love and joy that filled my life now. One evening, William and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set. He turned to me with a warm smile and said, "You know, Kelly, I admire your strength. What you went through is so hard, yet here you are, stronger and happier." I leaned against him, feeling the comfort of his arms. I couldn't have done it without friends like Diane and Jeremy, and especially without you, I replied, my heart full of gratitude. Our conversation drifted to the future, to dreams and plans we hadn't yet explored. The pain and drama of the past no longer held me back. They had become stepping stones that had led me to this peaceful moment. From time to time, I would hear news about Janet, Tyler, and Adam. Janet and Tyler were serving their sentences, facing the consequences of their actions every day. Adam, however, struggled to rebuild his life. His betrayal was known by the community, leaving him isolated and filled with regret. Although I had moved on, there was a part of me that felt a bit of satisfaction knowing they faced the results of their choices. They had caused me pain, and now they had to deal with the karma of their actions. As I reflected on my journey, I saw how much I had changed. I had gone from a woman who was controlled and hurt by others to someone who stood up for herself, fought for justice, and took back her life. Now, surrounded by love and support, I felt ready for whatever the future held. The challenges and heartaches of my past had shaped me, but they didn't define who I was. I was Kelly, a survivor, a woman who had found happiness despite the odds. My past would always be a part of me, but it was the story of my present and future that truly mattered. It was a story I was excited to write, a story of love, resilience, and newfound joy. I was no longer just someone who had been wronged. I was a woman who had reclaimed her life, embraced love, and looked forward to the future with hope. With William by my side and friends who truly cared about me, I knew that whatever came next, I would face it with strength and happiness. This was my new chapter, and I was ready to make the most of it.